Hi, this is Carter Conlon again, and welcome to my morning. I'm not in my usual location because I'm here in New Jersey because I've got jury duty on Wednesday, starting on Wednesday, so I have to be up and early, gone to the courtroom, and that's how I know that I think my life is transformed and I am a new creation in Christ Jesus, because I'm not complaining about it, and I think I'm actually looking forward to it. You never know who you're going to meet there. You never know what God's going to do. And I've learned over the years to be surprised at how God responds to the cry of somebody's heart. Maybe it's mine, or maybe somebody else's, and maybe I'm the answer to the prayer that they're praying or the cry that they're crying out to God. So you just never know. I have a little bit of just a stirring inside. I don't know what it's going to be, but I know that God is in every day, and I just look forward to seeing how he shows his hand of kindness to somebody else through my life. Now, I want to talk today to you about grapefruit evangelism. Now, that sounds like a crazy title, but actually it's a truth. It's a true story in the early years. Let me start with reading from Romans chapter 10, beginning at verse 13. Paul says, Whosoever shall call upon the name of the Lord shall be saved. How shall they call on him in whom they have not believed? How shall they believe in him of whom they have not heard? And how shall they hear without a preacher? And how shall they preach except they be sent? As it is written, how beautiful are the feet of them that preach the gospel of peace and bring good tidings of good things. Many, many years ago, when we were pastoring in Canada, we started to pray together. There was myself, there was another pastor, Glenn Stephen, from the French church that started from our church, the English church in the community, and Pastor Teresa, and maybe a couple of others. We simply began to pray, God, give us a strategy to reach the people in this community. They're very staunchly religious and somewhat opposed to our message. But God, there has to be a way to reach them. And so we just prayed it and put it all in God's hands. And amazingly enough, one day we had a small little bus that we used to use to pick up kids to bring them to church and such, like on Sunday. And Pastor Glenn, who was staying with us at the time, came home, and he had been at a food bank in the city of Ottawa, and they had too much grapefruit, actually tons of grapefruit, and they didn't know what to do with it. It was going to spoil, so he actually loaded up the whole of the van, like a 17 or 21-seater van. He loaded it up front to back with boxes of grapefruit. He drove in the driveway with this grapefruit and told me about it, and I walked out and looked at it, and I was thinking, first of all, I was thinking, what were you thinking that you loaded up this small bus or van with grapefruit? What in the world are we going to do with this? We probably had hundreds of grapefruit when you added them all up in the boxes in the van. What are we going to do? And then the idea came to us, well, we're going to have to find some hungry families to be able to take this grapefruit to. Otherwise it's going to spoil. So we knew of one or two families that were struggling financially. So we went into the community, knocked on a door, and the one thing I found over the years is the poor know the poor. Those that have a hard time making ends meet, they know where other people are that also have a hard time making ends meet. So we went to the first door, we brought them a box of grapefruit. We went to the second door, and I don't remember, but I don't think there was anybody there that was adverse to receiving a box of free grapefruit from us. And we did it in the name of Jesus. We did it in the name of the local church that we had founded in the community. And what we didn't realize at the time is that God had actually answered our prayer. Because we were praying, God, how do we reach the community? What is it you would have us to do? Not realizing the Lord answered our prayer by sending a van load of grapefruit to us. Because we really hadn't thought of reaching the poor. I got to be honest about it. It should really be a no-brainer, but we really hadn't thought of it. We didn't have the resources to do it. And we're struggling just to keep the church in order and keep everything there going. And the thought of getting food and taking it to the poor just wasn't there at the time. But God's mercy, there are people in the community, especially the poor, that are crying out to Christ for help. God, the way they knew him, they're crying out to him for help. And he responds to their cry and to our prayer by sending a van load of grapefruit to us that we in turn took to them. And it was the beginning of a food bank that, as far as I know, is still there today. We became the Eastern distribution wing of one of the major food banks in the capital city of Canada called Ottawa. And we could take as much food as we want from that massive food bank and bring it out. And by the time I left for New York City, the records that we had at that time, we were feeding about 237 families, either full or part-time. And it was a great, great blessing to the church because we didn't make the poor in the community come to us. We actually went to the poor. The people who had a need could call us, and we had a center where they would box the food per family, per need, whatever it was that they needed. We would have a list at the back of the church on Sunday morning, and we would say to the people, when the service is over, you'll see a list of food that needs to be delivered. Would you please check off some of the names you can stop by on the way home and bring them some food? So actually the church went out to the poor. And because of that, people started to get saved. People started to come to church. And of course, when people do get saved, the reasons for their poverty, sometimes drinking or whatever, start to go away. They start to prosper. The church started to grow, especially the French-speaking church started to grow. The presence of God was there. It was just amazing to be part of something that God had initiated. Now, he knew what he was going to do. It reminds me of the story that I like to tell you all the time of, he said to his disciples, how shall we feed all these people? They all start looking in their pockets and they can't figure out how to do this. But there's a little boy in the crowd with just a little lunch who gives it to Jesus. He multiplies it and feeds the crowd. Well, that's kind of what happened in this circumstance. It started with grapefruit. And we took the little we had and we took it out to the poor, and we began to realize that this is the way. Even scripturally, this is the way to start reaching in a community that has become, in a sense, a little bit adverse to the message of Christ that we were bringing them. Their hearts started to soften. People started to come to Christ. We started to ask the church to bring actually food to the church that we started to distribute. Then after that, the food bank in Ottawa found out about us and made us the Eastern distribution of a major center. So the supply was there. And I was thinking, how shall they hear without a preacher? And how shall they preach unless they're sent? So God sent us with a busload of grapefruit. That's all I can tell you. A thought that we never would have come up with on our own. And so I've learned over the years to be surprised by the way God does things. And not to try to anticipate how it's going to happen when I call out to him or ask him to do something. He's going to do it in a way quite often that I'd never anticipated. And I think of what it must look like in heaven, because it says in the scriptures how beautiful are the feet of those on the mountains who bring glad tidings of good things. And I think of the feet of those of us who carried boxes of grapefruit to families, in a sense, that maybe couldn't feed their kids or couldn't feed them nutritiously for whatever reason. And there we were in the name of Christ at the door with a box of grapefruit. And eventually the church herself started going to homes and bringing boxes of food to people who were hungry, to kids who were hungry, people who couldn't make lunches for their children at school or feed them after school, whatever the case might have been. And I'm thinking of all the beautiful feet. It started with just a couple of us, and after that, all the beautiful feet that started going into the community and started taking food to homes where people were crying out to God. How shall they hear without a preacher? And how shall they preach except they be sent? And it was an amazing, amazing opportunity to reach the community. The hearts of the people began to soften. And eventually, I remember even one town council that was of another religion and probably not very enamored with our presence in the community actually gave us turkeys and such like to give to the people at Christmas time in the community, because the reputation of a church that's doing the work of God soon spreads. And all of a sudden you see hearts starting to soften everywhere. I just thank God for the way he does things. So that's why, I guess, I'm excited about jury duty coming up this week, because I don't know who's crying out. It might be the defendant, who knows? But somebody needs to know that Jesus loves them. So I'm not upset about having to sit in a jury. I don't know if it might be a day, a week. I don't know how long it's going to be. I don't mind that, because somebody there needs to know that Jesus Christ loves them. And so there's going to be at least one set of beautiful feet in the jury box this week. This is Carter Conlon, and welcome to my morning. He who has a merry heart has a continual feast. By the grace of God, what started out with grapefruit has become a feast in my own heart. Love you so much. Look forward to seeing you again tomorrow. And I hope that my morning will make your day. God bless you.